as just like a hard summary of all the combat mechanics we're seeing here, because there's a lot, and having spent like the past hour and a half like going through frame by frame looking at all of this stuff, there's definitely quite a bit of nuance and intricacies just in the small amount of combat gameplay we see in here, because there's only like, what, 2 minutes maybe combined combat time, but they do showcase a lot of things that allow us to kind of understand the systems in depth. Obviously, this is like not even a beta or anything, right? Like this is just like trailer footage. Like first look gameplay sort of thing, so they could definitely change systems. But one of the big things that pretty much anyone's gonna immediately notice once they look at any of this gameplay is the block and parry system. I'm just gonna call it a perfect block, actually, instead of a parry, because it's more accurate, because it's not like you're inputting an attack or anything. You're inputting a block, and you have to time the block correctly. It's not like in ZZZ where you have to press the inputs during the gold flash window to swap out and like or to like do the parry an animation. You can block manually after the window is over, which we can see later on in the video. You'll just fail to get the bonuses you get for actually perfect blocking. So it's really more of a perfect block system from what I can tell. So we see plenty of times where they do it too late, but they still block. They just don't get the bonus stagger damage and things like that. But yeah, so starting off with the perfect block system, once this guy is there, cool. Rewind just a little bit. You can see there's a circle on his head. So when he's doing this, so when there's a circle, she 180s for the flex, and then right here is, you can tell they're doing the block input because they take this block stance. And so it's because the block stance happens during the circle parry window. You can see that now their stagger bar has a little bit of red built up on it. They also take a little bit of chip damage still, so blocking this game still takes chip damage, which means like doing like level 1 quote-unquote no-hit runs might not necessarily be a thing. They could probably still chip you to death, but we don't know that until we see like numbers and everything. I mean, you can still just dodge everything, but if you're doing block stuff, I guess you technically can't do... You don't do no damage, at least. You can still do like no hits. But it can be a problem, I would see, for like challenge runs doing like level 1 things. But then there is a second, then the werewolf is doing a second attack. Ooh, let's rewind a little bit. Werewolf is doing a second attack after this first parry. And if we slow it down, you can see that the werewolf has another yellow circle, indicating this is another parryable attack. Oh, another attack coming that is not parryable, perfect blockable. So you can see right here that they're in their recall animation, but then there's a very sharp stance change here, which is very likely when they input the block animation. From having like stared at so many Monster Hunter World stances and footage frame by frame, when you see these kinds of more exaggerated, sharp stance changes, that's generally when you're inputting a new thing that has a very wildly different action, and it's kind of, I don't remember the word, is it tweening? It's basically shifting it over to that different pose. So yeah, you can see that they're getting in that block here, so they time it during the circle, and bang. You can see immediately right here that their stagger right here is going up. And they take a little bit of chip damage still. You can see the health has gone down a little bit. Take a like, what was it? 209, I think it was. Then they shoot them a bunch in the face. And since you can also shoot the normal enemies, it looks like, with your gun to build up their stagger. And then you get this, and then once their stagger is broken, or their stance is broken, whatever the fuck you want to call it, you can press a special button to do a cool finisher attack. And if we take a look at some of the later footage, we can see that, like I said, so you have to be doing perfect blocks, right? And if we continue on in here, you just see more and more perfect blocks. Like, every single block in this gameplay footage is perfect. So, oh look, they're doing that attack. And you can tell right here, the stance change is where they start the block input. Circle's still active, so it blocks that attack. And we see the stagger bar actually just fully fucking breaks at that point. And then we also see the werewolf come in and get blocked by the also get blocked here. And their stagger bar also increases. while the one in the back is just too far away. But then, right here, they have another circle. And they just fucking ignore them by doing the F inputs to finish the other one. And here as well, it's hard to tell because of the camera angle and it being really zoomed in. But you can see there is that yellow circle, white, yellow, whatever circle, around the werewolf's head. And right here is when they're clearly inputting block, right? Yeah, so right here, they're inputting block. And the block is inputted during the circle still being existing, and then the circle goes away here. So this is like a few frame. This is almost a frame perfect block. But it blocks the enemy. And you can see where their break is at. And then similarly on the second attack, you can see that there is still a circle on the head right here. They're still in the recall animation. And then they're re-inputting block and getting a block here. And both of them increase the stagger bar. But we'll show later an example where if you don't re-input the block, it doesn't actually increase stagger. And then alt animation, very cool, looks very cool. Wow, look at cinematic, thing dies. Very stylish finisher. Back into overboard immediately, so it's not instant space fighting necessarily. Alright, so if we take a look later on, it's actually in the boss fight, I believe, is where we get to, like, see it properly. But in this boss fight, first off, we can, at the very beginning of the boss fight, they show off an example of what it looks like when you fail to input a perfect block. Because right here, you can see the circles are closing for this charge attack. I think they very intentionally did this too, to show this off. And so now we can see right here, the circles have closed. But we haven't inputted block yet. There's been no stance change. And then about 10-ish frames later, we input block. And it fucking beats our ass over. So the timing does matter. And this suggests that you can input block whenever, because the circle's already closed, but you could put the block input in. It's possible that as soon as a circle starts, that's the only time you can put in block, right? Even if you do the timing late, but this does, at least to me, suggest that that block is just an input you can just do whenever, basically. And the block still does block attacks normally, but this is a heavy attack or whatever it is, something like that, so it knocks you over. But there are other instances where they don't do a perfect block, and you get the stagger, and you don't get the extra stagger damage, but you still just block it normally. But that one seems like it's when you have to physically do that way. And once again, we can see perfect blocking. It's very hard to tell unless you slow it down frame by frame, but the horses do have circles over the head. And you can see right here is when they're inputting block, because it turns them around into the animate. This is like almost a frame perfect parry. Like this is like two frames, frame perfect. Oh, like a frame 2, frame 3 parry. But yeah, you can see that the stagger did increase with that one. Okay, yes, really. Yep, right here as well. So once again, we can see that there are circles, and it's very hard to tell again because of camera angle. But when it comes back down, and we input the block here, we still get a perfect block. It's just you can't actually see the circles because they're off screen. Like, you can't actually see the circles around their head, but this is where the block input happens. And apparently, it's good enough to get the perfect block and cause some stagger damage right there. Which, without, like, slowing this down, it's very awkward to tell. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people don't realize that that's how it works, because you have to, like, slow it down frame by frame to, like, actually see some of these. You can see right here, Artoria here. Oh, come on, bud. Toria here. I think this is another case where you just can't see the circle because they're off screen. But Altoria here pulls out their shield and blocks. So this one's a little harder to tell. This is a little harder to tell because this is like the only time we see her do a block input. So it's a little hard to tell here if they actually did a block input because there's like too many special effects going over it. We do know that they can hold up their shield with right click as it's got shown earlier in, but this one's a little harder to tell whether they actually block it because like we see the stance switch here and we see like the blue glow, so this might just be a frame perfect block. It's hard to tell, but the stagger meter does increase, and it seems like Artoria here, or Saber, or whatever you want to call her, has like a little. Actually, now I think about that, does she even take damage from that? I'm now wondering if she's like immune to damage chip when she blocks. No, she is not. She still takes chip damage. Yeah. 75,000 down to 74,672, which is actually a bit more than they were taking from the earlier ones. Let's get to the boss. But if we move that to the second phase of the fight. So right here, again, perfect block. You can see that the circle's still active when the block happens, so we get stagger damage. So this one is the interesting one. Because here, as far as we can tell at least, in this follow-up attack, we can't see a circle. Like, this is one of the more interesting ones in the footage, because this is a combo attack, and we can see right here that there isn't a circle, but you can also see that they re-input block right beforehand, right? Like, this is not, like, there is the recall animation right here, and then you can see around right here. Yeah, right there. So, like, this is, like, the finishing of the recall animation, and then they heavily stance switch to, like, the blocking stance we've seen before. And even though we don't see a circle, which could just be, like, a beta footage issue, right? Or maybe it's intentional. We still get a perfect parry, or perfect block, rather, and get the stagger increase. This one is particularly weird, and I think it might just be, like, you know, early gameplay footage issue. But for this one, there's another attack without a circle. And you can actually see them initiating a block again here, right? They're blocking. And then the attack lands. Oh, wait, no. Let me go back a bit further. One sec. Let's just do this. All right. First attack. Second attack. Yeah, so that one's interesting, because if we take a look at what just happened there, she has her block active here as far as we can tell, but she gets hit. Let me close the captions real quick so we can actually see the HP. So 29,808, and then this lands. And they take what looks like the same chip damage as before, around like, so what, 29,568. So like, yeah, 240 damage. That's about the same chip damage, but we don't get any kind of like animation block thing or hit registration here, right? But it did look like they still blocked it properly, but you can see the stagger didn't increase at all. And then for the second one, go the other way. And then for the second one, we can see that they didn't re-input block, they just held it. Like, you can see that it wasn't a perfect block or anything, so we don't get any stagger increase. And then on this one, we can see very clearly here, at least, that they'd never re-input block. Like, they never re-input block. This is just them holding block after the last attack. Like, there's no like noticeable stance change. Because if they re-input a block, there will be like at least one frame of their stance moving towards like neutral or whatever. Like the angle of the blade changing a lot, but there isn't. So this is them just holding block, and we can see if you hold block, you don't get any stagger increase. So like perfect blocking is required, but it seems like you can hold block at the very least in between attacks. But like I said, I think this suggests you can just hold block whenever. But the perfect block mechanic is very important, both for dealing stagger damage and also for QTE buildup, which we'll cover after that. And then once again, we can see inputs block. This one is, I think, this one that's particularly weird. I think this one's particularly weird. I think it might just be like an issue with it being like early gameplay footage, but like we. All right, no, that's right. This is where they just dodge instead, but also you can see that that was a perfect dodge, right? There's no like indicator or anything, but they did dodge during the circle input and iframed the attack, and then the follow-up attack does a very like let's rewind that so you can see exactly how much, like. Their follow-up attack does a, if you watch the top here, very big chunk. Like the dodge counter, for lack of a better term, does a massive chunk. Like that's as much as like one of the perfect blocks from earlier. So it seems like perfect dodging is an option if you still want to build up stagger. You don't have to use the perfect block mechanic. So perfect dodging into that follow-up does a huge chunk, and then we can see the basic attacks afterwards do very little increase. Like, we can see that these next few basic attacks do very little increase. And then... let's see right here. Circle is active. And we can see them holding a block stance. We can see them holding a block stance for another perfect parry that does another good chunk. Although now I'm curious. I didn't notice an animation thing earlier with this. It's really hard to tell with this one. It's really hard to tell with this one. So one of two things is happening here. Cause like we can see that they're like in a like attack, like in a basic attack string, right? Need to rewind a bit. So dodge counter 1, 2, and then 3 is this like flipping attack, right? So like, but they do the flipping attack, and it collides with their hitbox. It looks like. And causes like a perfect block, which suggests that at the very least that third basic attack can also act as a perfect block or parry. It's either that or somehow, or you can animation cancel out of even this like third basic attack with a block. Like one of those two things has to be happening. Hard to tell which one it is. But like one of those two things has to be happening, because like either during this time they've inputted a block and it's just taking a long time for the animation to catch up, or this hitbox counts as a perfect block slash or parry or whatever you want to call it in this case. And it's actually a very big chunk of, in fact, you can see this is significantly bigger stagger than we ever get from any of the perfect blocks. So that suggests this is actually like an active attack parry, because this is that's twice as much gain on stagger as we get with the perfect blocks. So that suggests that you have attacks that can also, in those circle windows, parry, and they're even stronger because you can't just safely block them, right? Like, if you mess up the block time, you still block. Or if you mess up the perfect block time, you still block, but in this case, you risk getting hits. So, presumably that basic attack 3 might be, like, the finishing move on the attack, but this shows that some attacks are able to also actually parry and do even more stagger damage. That one's interesting. So, taking shots. So, right here. God, that's like a frame perfect that's still like a goddamn. Okay, yeah. So, we can see that the circle is there, and then it goes away, and then right after it goes away, like right here, they input a block. So this is, they input a block right here, and they are low on, they lose a tiny bit of chip damage, but the stagger bar does not go up because it's not a perfect block timing. God, that's like frame perfect. And then we input another block right here. Or rather, sorry, right here, they're just holding the block animation because we don't see like the stance change for a re-input. So no stagger damage. And then you can see right here, circle is still active. And it's like, it is gone. And they've dropped their guard there. And then this next attack, see the circle's still there, circle's still there, circle is still just barely there. Like, you can see the faintest outline of the circle still existing. And then that's when the input block, right? And you can also see that this one also is significantly more block than before, which could just be like a weird early gameplay bug or something like that. It's also weird though because the previous attack right before that one does like chip damage. Like this attack right here. Like, it looks like they dropped that block, as far as we can tell, right? They dropped the block as far as we can tell, and they do take jab damage right here. Like, this attack right here, you can see does do damage to their health, so they get hit by this attack. Like, they drop block for whatever reason and eat this attack. But then this parry has twice as much, oh, this perfect block rather has twice as much stagger buildup, which, again, either it's a weird gameplay bug issue, it could just be that it's an early gameplay thing, or it's the fact that this was literally frame perfect. Like, this was insanely frame perfect parry. Like I said, like, we can see that the circle still exists here. Still exists here. And then right here is where the input block. So this is literally a frame perfect. This is literally a frame perfect block. Or like Roddy said, they started in a counterattack dual deck. But yeah, yeah, compared to the ones earlier in the fight, like this one has even more parry, so it's hard to say. Maybe it is like literally frame perfect makes a difference, or it's just a weird early gameplay issue. But yeah, that pretty much covers all of like the perfect block related things. Steppies. That pretty much covers all the block related things we could garner from this. To summarize, basically it seems like you can block whenever you want. If you block during the like circle on the attack closing, then you get a perfect block off, which causes stagger damage. If you miss the timing, you don't do the stagger damage, but you can still block, with the exception of certain like heavier attacks like the chariot charge attack right here at the very beginning, where they fail the timing, because you can see that they block after the circles are well closed, like about 10 frames after, and then they get their ass knocked over. But on the later attacks, we see where the timing isn't perfect, or they just hold block. They just don't do stagger damage, but they still block the attack. So that's probably just special, like quote-unquote heavy attacks or something. But yeah, that pretty much covers it for the block mechanics. So the two other main mechanics of notes that were noticed is one is the QTE swap system, and the other one is that fact that headshots actually matter. So let's just cover headshots real quick because that one's super fast. Let's see, should be the one right here? Yeah, so right here. You can tell from a lot of the footage that this is actually manual aim. In fact, in the boss fight from earlier, they actually whiff some rounds because they don't flick fast enough. Like, I think it's right about here. Yeah, they start shooting. And you can see they actually whiff a few rounds because they don't flick fast enough, right? So there is manual aim. Is there also going to be auto aim? Probably, but it's probably going to be like slow tracking or something, because, I mean, it is going to be a mobile game at the end of the day, right? But yeah, right here, we can see that after this pot goes by. Oh, wait, no, it's not this one. I think I got lost. Okay, there it is. Yeah, this one right here. So after this one, it's scene cuts. So right here, we can see that this first bullet very clearly hits, like, the chest, torso, right? That very first round very clearly hits the chest and the torso, like the chest, or the torso, lower torso, stomach, right there. And that bullet does 333 damage. White damage. It seems like there's split elemental damage or something, because there's the purple numbers also coming up, but it's kind of hard to ascertain much about that from the footage we have in here. We do kind of see there's like some sort of status build-up thing too as well, but again, hard to really get that much information out of the limited stuff we have in here. The next one's a critical, so it's kind of hard to judge because we don't necessarily know what that crit damage multiplier is. I mean, we could compare it to other numbers, but it's not really the important point here. And then we can see that this round clearly is a headshot and does 666 damage. It does double damage. Is that the same for every enemy? Maybe not. Maybe they have different headshot multipliers, but headshots do matter in this game. And you can see that's this round and this round. Hit the head, 666s. I guess at this point it's still colliding with the head hitbox, just because if you don't know how third person, this is honestly just because double hit scan reasons. Like, this very clearly should not be hitting the head, but it is, and it's because double hit scan. If you don't play like third person FPSs or know how like the hit scan works in the game, generally speaking, how it works is you have one crosshair, which is pointing from your barrel to where the crosshair or the center of the screen is looking at, and it actually accounts for the geometry. The other one is also just straight on, and most third-person FPSs account for both, meaning there are situations where your crosshair is completely off of them, but because the angle of the barrel to your crosshair is crossing paths with their hitbox, it still counts as hitting them, like, in the head. TLDR, in third-person shooters, you, in some situations, have an increased chance to headshot or land shots. But yeah, so headshots do matter, and it's really all there is to say about that, but headshots do matter. It's hard to tell if headshots matter for stagger or not, though. It's really hard to tell in this particular clip, and in the boss fight, they just only land headshots. Like, it's really hard to tell if the stagger... as far as I can tell, it seems like the stagger buildup is per bullet regardless. And it's a lot of stagger buildup for, like, landing shots, right? But it seems like it's the same per bullet, but it's kind of hard to tell. Alright, anyway. Next, most important part is the QTE system. So we can ignore this first fight, because this first, like, tutorial fight sort of thing going on with the, like, one wolf, the QTE bar, which is this, or QTE gauge, which is this very center one, doesn't change, like, ever. Like, it just doesn't increase, which I assume is because it's probably, like, an early game fight before they introduce a QTE mechanic, so they just don't let it change. But we can see this second fight really clearly showcases it, because it's where they show off all the QTE stuff. For those who don't know, QTE, quick time event. This is not, but quick time event in, like, the action gacha sphere means a different thing from, like, what it means in, like, Western action games. Because in Western action games, QTEs are, like, the one with, like, the steppies over here, right? Where you, like a button pops on screen, you mash the button, or you have to press the button at the right time to trigger it. That's a quick time event in, like, Western action games. But in action gacha games, QTEs are referred to quick time events, which normally means some kind of special swap in or summon attack for your teammates. Like in Honkai Impact 3rd, when you fulfill certain conditions, the portrait of your teammate will have special little glowy sort of throbbing effects and stuff. And if you press the button to swap into them, they swap in with a special bonus or a special attack. In PGR, when you trigger a QTE on the teammate, it actually summons them to the field to do a temporary attack while you stay on the character you're on currently. So, like, that's what I mean by QTEs in the context of a gacha game. Are those kinds of swap-related things. So if we take a look here, we can see that in the very center, in the second fight is where they kind of showcase it, we can see that there's this thing in the center. It says 1 right now and it has 1 tick, and we can see that it's about right here at like the quarter-ish line. It's probably supposed to be thirds, but like right around here is where you have the 1 bar. And we can see that after... So you can see that that wasn't a perfect parry, right? No stagger increase. It was just perfect block. That was just regular block, so it doesn't change. And then these basic attacks, and then that perfect block very significantly increases the QTE gauge. I'm just going to call it the QTE gauge. I don't think we have an official term. But like you can see that it very significantly spikes up after that. So that's another reason why perfect blocking is so important in this game. You build up stagger, but you also build up QTE gauge. We can see that the basic attack combo is also building up QTE gauge. And then, again, perfect block builds up more gauge. And then we can see right here, so the bullets build up a lot of stagger, right? As you can clearly see. But they don't build up QTE gauge. The range attacks don't seem to build up QTE gauge at all. Or secondary attacks, I guess, because fucking Great Sword, Great Shield, Artorias, blue lady with blonde hair, her gun, quote-unquote, or her secondary weapon is a shield. So, yeah, your secondary weapon doesn't seem to generate any QTE gauge, because they unload all 6 rounds into this guy's face, and, like, the QTE gauge doesn't increase at all the entire time. Yeah, QTE gauge doesn't increase the entire time that they're unloading rounds. But then, once they input the finishing attack... There we go, there we go. Once they input the finishing attack right here, we can see that the QTE gauge goes up, and now they have a 2, because it's at this... I'm guessing it's supposed to be 2/3, but it looks like it's halfway because of the barring in a way. And they have two QTEs queued up, and you can see that on the right-hand side, they have these glowing portraits. So she does the finisher, and the finisher builds up decent amount of QTE. Start shooting people again. We can even look at that again and see that while she's shooting, like, so she got like a gigantic chunk of increase from the finisher, and now that she's shooting, the QTE gauge isn't increasing. Like, your secondary just doesn't seem to generate QTE. And then once again, perfect parry, perfect block gives a big chunk of QTE gauge. And now we can see that they end up swapping into Bunny Artorias here. And as soon as they do, the bar drops down from 2 to 1, and they do this special intro attack, which is the spin to win. And the spin to win also still seems to generate a decent amount of QTE gauge in this one. Like, we can see it starts right about here, and then... Although maybe that's because it staggered someone. It's actually a bit hard to tell there. Oh, did it stagger someone? I don't think so. Oh yeah, no, maybe, so it seems like right here, because this triggers a stagger on this guy from the attack, that's when there's a noticeable jump in QTE gauge. So the actual attack itself doesn't really do much, but triggering staggers on people is also a big chunk of QTE gauge. And then she does a finisher, which again, big chunk of QTE gauge. We're still at 1, and then we can see right here, right on this swap, this is another QTE pop. So everything's still gold on the right-hand side, right? And we can see we have the one. The moment that we swap into Sexy Underground Doctor Lady, my beloved. We love Bloodborne. The QTE loses, 1 charge, 1 uses worth of gauge. Also, fun notes, the swap time is only 0.5 seconds in this game, which will be interesting implications if quick swap works. As we can see, like 1 frame later. Ooh. Oh, actually, it's really hard to see in this one, but it goes from it goes down to 0.4 then 0.3. It's more clear on some of the other footage. And she does this little special QTE attack. She has like some special charge attack here. She's doing a basic combo, and we can see during this basic combo, the QTE gauge is only increasing a tiny bit. But then perfect parry gives us a nice chunk. And that nice chunk gives us enough to get a QTE off on MC, which we can actually see. This one is interesting. So we actually see MC do this. But, like, the QTE gauge barely gets tickled here for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. Because they also do a finisher here, and it barely tickles the QTE gauge. But so right here we can see that they don't have QTE ready. So even though this parry happens, it's not enough to get QTE going. Or this perfect block, sorry, happens. It's not enough to get QTE going. And so we can see it's still green portraits, or backgrounds for the portraits, it's not yellow. But then as soon as we swap in, we see that there's not a 1, there isn't an extra tick, there isn't enough, because the threshold, I believe, is right where this line is. So there's not enough for that 1 QTE. We swap in, and we can see that the Doctor stands in neutral for a few frames, which means that they aren't doing an intro, like some kind of special intro attack, right? Like, they're in mid-combat, but when they swap in, they don't even do, like, a basic attack or anything. They're in a neutral stance. So this suggests that you don't really get a special swap-in attack if you swap in without QTE gauge. But they swap into the Doctor to do a finisher attack, or the special stun attack, whatever you want to call them, the F attack. F's in the chat. And this one's particularly funny because she fucking throws him at the other guy, and he explodes. Which is just funny to me. But you can also see that that finisher... Let's rewind this. Fucking hilarious. You can see that finisher increases the QTE gauge enough to have a 1 there. This is also an interesting implication, because since if you don't burn a QTE, you can swap to a different character and use the finisher. If certain characters have better effects or like better finisher attacks like that, F attacks, then swapping into them to do that is like a fun tech you can do. But yeah, this gives us enough QTE, so then we swap back into Bunny Galatoria, and she spin. And we can see that that spin attack gave us a little bit of gauge, but now, as we can see, her right click is her shield. Instead of bullets, she just has this gauge or whatever. And then she does, like, what I would only assume is, like, a right click into a left click, a shield bash attack. And we can see that the QTE gauge doesn't even move up at all, just like when shooting the bullets. And that also, like, burns, like, all of her shield gauge. Like, she has a shield gauge. And then, as soon as she lands the shield bash, it's all gone. And it starts regenerating. So, it's pretty safe to say secondary weapon attacks just don't build any QTE gauge. You have to be using primary attacks, bonuses for perfect blocks, finishers, all that kind of thing. Yeah. But yeah, that pretty much summarizes everything we've kind of found out about the combat system in this game, just based purely off of spending way too much time frame by frame analyzing the like 2 or 3 minutes of fucking combat in this entire gameplay trailer, gameplay showcase. But it looks like there's gonna be a lot of interesting like depth to the combat system. The QTEs are definitely gonna be interesting. I do wonder about like, we haven't seen any kind of swap canceling thing in this, and we don't know if swap canceling is even possible. It might just be like a hard QTE single character swap system like you have in Honkai Impact 3rd, or like Genshin, except for Genshin doesn't have like the special swap-in attacks, right? Where you can't have multiple characters in the field simultaneously. But there's obviously a very big focus on like the skill ceiling in this game of adding in perfect blocks and potentially special attack parries like we saw in the boss fight, but it's hard to tell with that one if that's what happened. As well as headshotting actually mattering. Like, there's a lot of skill expression in this game that exists, but from what we could tell, it looks like you can just hold block, right? And you don't get the stagger increase, but you can still just hold block, so that can make the skill floor a bit more approachable, which is a good idea for a gacha game to have a more approachable skill floor. Definitely makes a lot of sense. So yeah, the combat system looks really good. It definitely seems like something that you would probably enjoy a lot if you're a fan of things like Sekiro, or even like since the perfect dodging also seems to still work, also things like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, that kind of a thing. It's a bit more of like a Bloodborne Sekiro pacing in terms of the attacks though. It doesn't seem like the swap cancels, which for me, I'm still going to play the shit out of this game. I'm still going to enjoy it, but if it doesn't have swap cancels, I don't know if this will necessarily become my favorite combat system in the gacha, but it's hard to say. I haven't played around with it yet, but swap cancels are one of the most fun things for me in the combat system. But either way, combat looks incredible. Really hoping that it lives up to or even surpasses what this gameplay showcase is showing. Yeah, I don't know. Looks like fun. I'm excited for the game now. Very, very excited for the game. It's also so pretty and the character designs are so beautiful. All right, well, I don't know if I'm going to end up clipping all of that together and putting on YouTube, but if I do, hi, YouTube. Say hi, YouTube, everyone. Hi, YouTube frogs. Do the algorithm things, like, subscribe, share. I don't know. Do whatever the fuck you want. Bye.